I think we can just
We
start.
can just begin? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our second of our third career mentoring session. So if you were here for the last one, we talked about preparing for first year university. Today, the whole topic of today's presentation is your first year at university. Not only university, university or college. I shouldn't just use the word university. I just guess any post-secondary this applies to, okay? My name is Alex. If you were here last time, you probably remember me. If you're new here, just a little bit about myself. So I graduated from the University of Waterloo, that is in Ontario, Canada. I took biomedical sciences there. I graduated with a psychology minor. While I was there, I did a joint program at Conestoga College, which is a college there. So I did biotechnology. So I graduated with both a college diploma and a university degree. And right now I am studying medical radiation sciences at the Michener Institute and the University of Toronto. So it is a joint program. Basically what it is, it's like X-ray techs. So I take X-rays. Right now I'm currently at Michael Garron Hospital, which is a hospital in Toronto. I take the X-rays for any patients. So with COVID happening, I actually handle with COVID patients. So a COVID patient would be in the room, we'll go in and we'll take a chest X-ray just to see how their lungs are doing. That's just a little bit about what I'm doing now. So before we get started today, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat, okay, at any time, and I'll be more than happy to answer. I will give you my email at the end. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, even after this session about the topics covered today or any questions you have yourself. What I said last time too is if you have specific questions for your own program or your own university, I can actually try to connect you with people who I know that are in that program. I have many friends that went to many programs, so maybe I'll be able to connect you with someone specifically studying that, okay? So today's agenda, we are going to talk about your whole first year at university or college, okay? So the idea here is that we're going to take the role of a student who is going to study at university or college this fall. So the plan we're going to take is, well, what does that student have to do before school starts? So school starts in September. So what should they do before that? Next, we're going to talk about orientation week, which is the first week at school. Then we're going to talk about midterms. So midterms are like kind of like half exams midway through the term. I'll talk more about that. Then we'll talk about your first exam season. And then that'll be your first term. So then we'll talk about any opportunities such as clubs or internships. And we'll end the presentation with my 10 tips. So if I were to go back in time and tell myself, give myself 10 pieces of advice before I went to university, these are the things I would say. Okay. So prior to starting school, so school starts in September for fall starting programs. There are programs that start in other terms, but the programs you're probably going to be applying to will start in September. So before school starts, if you are a international student or you are a student living in Canada that is going to move away from home, for example, I grew up in Scarborough, which is a city in Ontario, but when I went to Waterloo, I had to move to the city of Waterloo. So prior to starting school in September, there are things you have to do. For example, you have to find a place to live, right? So it makes sense to find a place to live and have a place set up before you come to Canada or before you move to your city. I talked a little bit about this in the last presentation, just a little bit more about this now. So in first year, your most common option to take is residence. What is residence? It's living on the university campus. You're living in a building owned by the university. For example, this is what a residence room looks like up here. And now when you look at it, you say, wow, that looks very boring, very plain. Um, the thing is, you can add stuff to it yourself. I know universities have poster sales, so you can buy posters. That's what a common thing students do. So these empty walls, you can put posters up of your favorite shows or anything. If you decide not to live on residence, you have to find your own accommodation. So when finding your own house or apartment, there are things you have to consider. For example, do you want it furnished or unfurnished? What does that mean? Furnished means it comes with furniture. So this room up here, this residence is furnished because it comes with a bed, a desk, a chair, okay? And it'll have a kitchen with appliances as well. You can find houses that are unfurnished, meaning there's no furniture whatsoever, and you have to find your own furniture. Now, what's the benefit of finding an unfurnished place? It's cheaper, right? It will be cheaper because it doesn't come with furniture, but then you have to find your own furniture. Then you have to decide how long do you want to live on at that place. So, for example, if your program has a fall and winter term, meaning 8 months of school, and then you do 4 months of co-op, you might say to yourself, well, maybe I want to do the co-op somewhere else. So maybe I don't want to live here anymore. So maybe it'd be better just to get an 8 month contract for residence. When you do an off-campus housing, so when you find your own house, you have to sign a contract, and normally that will be for a full year or a few years, okay? So those are just things to consider. It will depend on what you decide and where you decide to live. Now, another thing too is when you find a house or apartment to live, you have to pay money before you even move in. Okay? For example, you have to pay the last month's rent. That is normal. This is something so the homeowner ensures that you're gonna not gonna bail out on them. Okay? So if I pay $700 rent before I even move in, I have to pay 1 month of rent plus the month I'm moving in. So 2 months of rent just before I move in. There's also something called a key deposit. So you have to pay for your house key. And basically it's a deposit. So pretend the person that owns the house says, I need $200 for the key. You give them $200. When you move out, you give them back the key. They'll give you your $200 back. It's just to make sure that you don't lose the key. Another thing to consider is, do you want roommates or do you want to live alone? Now, living with roommates is cheaper, but living alone maybe will be nicer, right? Especially if you don't know anyone where you're moving. So I was lucky. I had some friends going to Waterloo. So I roomed with them my first year. But if you don't know anyone, then you're going to be assigned random people. And who knows, maybe that roommate is not clean. Maybe you don't like them. It's just a risk to take. So that's something to consider. The last thing to consider too is, especially with this year, to live on residence, you need COVID vaccination proof. So let me just open up. So many universities, Ryerson University is one of the universities in Toronto. So many universities are requiring students to be fully vaccinated if you want to live on residence, okay? So make sure you check your university before you move in this fall. If you're moving in this fall, even in future years, you still might have to show proof that you're fully vaccinated to live on residence, okay? That's just something to consider. Also, so you have found a place to live before school starts. Now you have to think about, if you're an international student, there are things you have to do before arriving to Canada. Again, you need proof of vaccination. So a thing now by the Canadian government, if you are coming to Canada as a student, you need proof that you are fully vaccinated from COVID, okay? Other things too, we'll talk about this after I have a link. What do you bring, right? If you're an international student, you cannot bring your whole house or all your furniture, all that. You can mostly just probably bring a suitcase. So what are the important things you want to bring? Another thing as well, if you're an international student and you are not a citizen of Canada, you need to apply for a study permit, okay? So let me just show you the links for that. So let's talk about this one, packing. What do you bring to university? Well, the University of Waterloo has a good website up here. I will provide all the links after we are done the presentation, or Una could share this presentation with you. I have all the links inside of the presentation. So if you're an international student, you need a bunch of legal documents. For example, your passport, that makes sense. Okay, a temporary residence visa, a letter of introduction. So there's a lot of things you need. Okay. Now, what about your own personal stuff that you should bring? They recommend bringing the required documents. Well, yes, you will need to bring your required documents. Items that remind you of your home country. This is a really good one. So I know homesick is a big thing that a lot of international students feel, especially when you come to Canada and there's such a different culture, right? So bringing items that remind you of home is a good idea. Medications, if you have any. A laptop is probably needed, um, because you can't bring a whole computer unless you plan on buying one when you're here. And they recommend, so if you're an international student, you will probably have to buy a lot of stuff when you get here, which makes sense because you cannot bring everything, right? So they recommend you buy the bigger items when you're here. So for example, that residence room I showed you, right? This mattress is probably a brick, not the most comfortable, and that pillow is probably not the best. You will probably have to buy your own if you want. Other things as well, like winter clothes. If you're not used to Canadian winters, it can get very bad where there's a lot of snow and you need a good winter jacket. That's a bigger item that you'll probably have to buy when you're here, okay? Okay, moving on. So now school has started. It is the first week of September. And the first week for first years is called orientation. Now, what is orientation? Well, usually it's a full week designed to introduce you to post-secondary. So basically, there are no classes the first year. Instead, you do these fun activities with other first years, and it's a great chance to meet new people, to have fun, and just to really introduce yourself to the campus and the area. So my first week at Waterloo, we had an orientation. We did a tour of the campus, which is good because some campuses are very big, especially University of Toronto St. George. Their campus spans a wide area. You play a bunch of games, you play a bunch of competitions. Orientation is optional. So mine, we had to do this boring dance, and I went home because I said I do not want to do that. It was burning hot outside, and so did a lot of other people. So it's up to you whether you want to participate in orientation. You do pay for it though. So there is a fee in your first year tuition that covers the orientation costs because usually they give you like a t-shirt and a bunch of other stuff. You can, if you do not want to go to orientation at all, usually you can opt out and they'll refund you that money, okay? But I always recommend going to orientation. Even if the stuff is boring, they really try to get you to meet new people, which is really good if you do not know anyone at your university, okay? So just participate. I always recommend participating. They give a lot of free food as well, so that's always a good thing. They give a lot of free stuff, so that's just things to consider. It really depends on your school, how good your orientation is, but I always recommend going to it, okay? So the first week at school is done, orientation is done. Now the second week, it's time to start your classes, okay? Now, what classes are you taking? Well, you have to look at your schedule, and a schedule is going to look something like this. It depends for all different universities. This was my schedule a while ago. It's not that bad because when you look here, Thursdays I had no class, which was very nice. So here's a schedule. It goes Monday to Friday, and you see the classes you have every day. So Monday at 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., I had physiology. This was with the University of Toronto. Okay. And right after that, at 11 to 1, I had radiography. Um, it's just a methodology class. It's something you don't need to know. And then Tuesday, these were my classes for Tuesday. As you see, I have gaps in here. So I had a break in between my classes. Wednesday, I had a lot of classes. Thursday, I had a day off. Friday, I had late night classes. Okay. So just first understand how to read your schedule. Okay. That is very important. Now before we move on, let's talk about course loads. So not all courses are worth the same amount. Now, what do I mean by that? So your normal definition of a course at university or college is a 4-month course, which is one term at university or college, okay? So a one-term course, a normal one-term course is worth 0.5 credits, okay? So that's the value assigned to a one-term course. Now, some schools do labs different than other schools. So, for example, at the University of Waterloo, labs, so for example, if I take a chemistry laboratory course, it is its separate course. It is its own individual course. It has its own marks, all of that, okay? Some other schools, for example, I think University of Toronto does this, incorporates the lab course into the normal course. For example, if I take chemistry, my chemistry lab is a part of my one chemistry mark, okay? So it depends on the school you're going to. But for example, like I said at Waterloo, when lab courses are their own courses, they are only worth half a credit. Why is this? Because lab courses aren't as intensive. They don't require as much work as a normal one-term course, okay? So that's just something to check up on the school you're going to see if the lab courses are separate courses or are included in the normal term course, okay? Some courses as well are special courses, meaning they last 2 terms. So for example, you can have a course that goes from fall all the way to spring. So instead of the normal 4 months, it is 8 months, and those are worth more. Normally they're worth just twice the amount because they're 2 terms. It could depend. You have to just check up on the specific course, okay? Now, let's talk about how many credits. So knowing the credit amounts, you need to consider how many credits you need for minors or majors, okay? So for example, I did a psychology minor. My psychology minor said for example, I needed 5 credits in psychology. So how many courses is that? That's not 5 courses. That's actually 10 one-term courses, okay? Or 5 two-term courses. So you really got to consider the value of a course and what they're requiring of you, okay? Lastly, before you move on, what does it mean to be a full-time or part-time student? So normally, students are full-time students, meaning they are taking So a full-time status is 3.0 credits. This is for the University of Toronto. This might change depending on your school. Okay. So in fall or winter, a student enrolled in 3.0 credits or more. So what is 3.0 credits? That means 6 one-term courses, right? Or for example, um, 5 one-term courses and 2 lab courses or something like that. Okay. So that gives you full-time status. What does full-time status mean? It means when you apply for financial aid, for example, like OSAP, which you might not be eligible for if you're not a citizen of Canada, you get more money if you're a full-time student. If you're a part-time student, you are enrolled in 2.5 credits or fewer in fall or winter. Now, what you notice here is that in spring or summer, a full-time only needs 1.5 and a part-time only needs 1. This is because spring or summer term, students, unless your program requires you to take a spring or summer term, it is optional. And some students just want to take a few courses, right? So if you want to get a minor and you don't have school in the summer, you're allowed to take 3 courses to work towards your minor, and that'll make you a full-time student, okay? So now it is our second week of school because we've done orientation the first week. You know how to read your schedule, um, and you know your student status, whether you're a full-time or part-time student. Now it is time for your first post-secondary class, okay? Now, once you find the room, you're gonna notice that um, if you're used to like a high school type classroom, university or college classes are very big, and this here is small for a university or college class, I would say. Might think this is a big class. This is a very small class. Even more so at colleges, I find you have very small classes like this, okay? Don't expect your first year classes to look like this. They're gonna be in a big auditorium or a big theater, and there's probably gonna be almost one of my classes had 800 students in that theater, right? Which is a lot of students. Okay. So it's going to be in huge auditoriums. Now, what is your first class going to look like? Normally, your first class is going to be an introductory class to what that class is about. So, for example, my first class, pretend, was a chemistry class. So I sit down, and my professor starts talking about the course itself. Now, they're going to introduce something called the course syllabus. Okay. This is probably a new thing for a lot of you, but the course syllabus basically provides you with all the information about the course. So if I go and I look at my chemistry course syllabus, it will give me the mark breakdown for the class. So what does that mean? So it's saying in this chemistry class, for example, we are going to have 2 tests, one worth 40%, one worth 60%. You'll find that on the syllabus, for example, okay? Also, it'll have the dates of those tests, okay? So it'll say your midterm will be on October 20th, for example. Your exam will be during exam week. So normally exam dates are determined later in the term because they have to organize it, okay? The syllabus will also include the contact information for your professor, okay? So it'll have their email and where to find them. That can be useful, for example. So say you have a midterm, and I know people that have had family members pass away right before a test. Well, they can't write that test. They have to go to a funeral. You're going to contact your professor, and there's also other things, I believe, depending on the school that you have to do. Um, so the first step there would be to contact the professor and let them know that you cannot make it, and let them figure out a compromise for you, okay? The course syllabus will also include office hours. So what are office hours? So the professor makes times when they are available and you can just walk in and ask them a question. Those are called office hours. So for example, the professor says, on Tuesday, I am free from 12 to 3. You can just walk in my office. They'll give you the location of their office and ask me any question. This is really good if you're struggling in the class or you want to ask about something, or even if you just want to talk to your professors. I never really did this, but I know people that just wanted to um, your professors do research, right? So if you're interested in the research they do, maybe you just want to ask them about that. Most people will be more than happy to just talk to you about what they do for outside of teaching. So office hours is a great time to go just have a chat with your professor if you want to, okay? So the last thing, so we're going to talk about a syllabus. We have an example of the syllabus on the next page. But the last thing I want to say is wait to get your textbooks. What do I mean by this? So you're going to look at the course syllabus and it's going to say you need this textbook, you need this textbook, and you need this textbook, for example. And then you go to the bookstore and you see those textbooks are $300 each, okay? what you're going to realize is a lot of your classes don't use textbooks, even though they say they are. So the syllabus will say you need this textbook, and the next thing you know, you buy it and you only use it once the whole term. Okay. Another thing you're going to realize is there's a lot of ways to get the textbooks for free online. Okay. Which you might already know. Okay. So just a story. So one of my good friends I met at university, one of the first week in class, I was sitting next to him. I did not know him at all. He hands me his USB and says, "Take all the textbooks." And he had all the textbooks on it. And then we became friends after that. So there's always ways to find textbooks for free. You could just do some searching online. I'm pretty sure it's not that hard. I can always help you. If you need, you could just send me your email. Send me an email, which I'll provide at the end. But please wait to get your textbooks. See if you even need them. Don't just look at the syllabus and say, okay, it says we need this textbook, so I'm going to buy it right away. Just wait, okay? Wait until you have to use it, okay? So before we move on, so Una provided us an example of a course syllabus for one of her classes at Western, okay? So here's the first page of the syllabus. So let's see what we're looking at here. So here it shows the course. So this syllabus was for biology statistics, okay? So this syllabus is only for this one course, okay? Now here they talk about the technical requirements. I assume this is because it was an online course, right? That they tell you, well, because it's an online course, you need internet, which makes sense. You need a working microphone, recommended, so not required, I would assume. And you need a laptop or a computer, okay? It tells you the important dates. So the classes start May 10th. The drop deadline. So what is the drop deadline? It is the last day you can drop a course without penalty, okay? So if you want to drop a course, you're not doing well in it, or you don't want to take it, you have to drop it by this day to one, get your money back. Sometimes they'll refund you half or full the amount of a course, because remember, you pay for each individual course. And also it won't show up on your transcript as a withdrawn course, okay? So if you drop it after this date, on your transcript that shows all your marks, it is going to say you withdrew from the course, which some people say doesn't look good. I don't know how much it matters at the end of the day, but if just to be safe, I would drop it before the drop deadline, okay? So as you see here on the syllabus, it introduces the course. So it says in this course, it is an introductory course to statistical methods, right? You're going to learn a little bit about the course, the list of prerequisites. So what is a prerequisite? It is a course you need to have done to take the course, okay? So, for example, if I am taking chemistry 2, a prerequisite for that would be chemistry 1. It makes sense. They would say you need to take the first chemistry before you take the second chemistry, okay? So that is a prerequisite course. An anti-requisite is a course that if you have taken it, you cannot take this course. Now, why would that make sense? Well, what if I am a programming student? I take the hardest programming course, and then I'm trying to take programming for science students, which is a very easy course probably for that student. They're going to say, no, you cannot take that, because why would you want to take this course? You have taken harder programming courses. We're not going to make you able to take that. So that's an example of an anti-requisite. So I assume here, so we see this is a statistics course, okay? So an anti-requisite would be economics or other statistic courses. They're going to say, if you took another statistics course, you don't need to take this course. So we're not going to let you take it, okay? Now, you also provided us with a mark breakdown. So for her biology class, as you see here, so every course for obviously is out of 100%. So her final exam was worth 35%. Term test 1, so these are like midterms, right? Her first test was worth 10%. Second test was worth 22%. She had skills development, which I assume was something like an assignment, worth 25%. And you had quizzes, probably a few quizzes worth 8% in total. And you're going to notice here, it's different for every class. So her chemistry class, right, had a lab component built into the class. So like I say, Waterloo does not do this. Lab components are separate courses. So her whole lab component was 20% of her chemistry mark. Okay, the midterm 24%, final exam 35, all out of 100, okay? And Una probably did this herself, right? Organizing this. This is a very good thing to do. All this information will be in the syllabus, but having it all on one page makes it easy for you, okay?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that,
Yep.
it's really easy to use Excel to keep track of your marks. Actually, prof wouldn't give you the mark before the exam. So it is a really good way to keep track of your own mark.
Yes, and I have a tool as well. I'm going to show in a bit that something I use. Probably not as helpful as just doing it on an Excel sheet, but I'll just show it. Um, Another thing I want to say about this too is some classes will give you the chance to get bonus marks, okay? So some classes will say, do this small extra assignment, we'll give you 2% bonus, 1% bonus. I had a class that even had a 5% bonus. Now, I always say do the bonuses because they'll pay off. Um, but just to put that in perspective, so I had a class with a 5% bonus mark, okay? So if I did this small assignment, I get an extra 5%. Now, for example, if this term test one was 10% and I got a 50% on it, that's a 5 out of 10%, right? So doing that bonus actually gave me now an 100 on that term test one, right? So people don't realize that 5% can really boost your mark, okay? So even if it's just a 1% bonus or a 2% bonus, it is worth it to do. Um, that's my advice to you, but it's always your choice, okay? And some classes will actually give you the opportunity to get bonus marks like that. Okay, so you've attended your first university class. You learned about the course and the course syllabus. Now you're going to attend your first lab session, okay? So like I said before, some labs are part of the course while other labs are their separate course. So this is what a university science lab would look like, very big open room. And you see there are many workstations, okay? So normally there's probably going to be 2 people per workstation. It might depend on the lab. So you're going to have a set amount of labs per term. For example, if they say you're going to have 5 labs a term, you are going to have the same lab partner for all those 5 labs normally, okay? So it is a good idea to find a good lab partner. You want someone that will actually do the work, right? A big thing about labs is you leave when you are done, okay? So if you take longer, the prof will probably stay there and say, okay, you have to finish before you leave. And you do have to finish because you have to get the results to write in a lab report, right? If you leave early without finishing the lab, then you don't have the information to put in your lab reports that you have to hand in, okay? So I really strongly emphasize this. Find a good lab partner. If you don't know anyone, then you probably have to take a risk just asking someone if they want to be your lab partner. Um, the thing about this too is your lab partner will probably become a good friend too, right? Because you're with them for a bit. You guys will have to work on lab reports together. You guys are a source of help for each other, right? So one of my good friends now, she was my lab partner first year, and we still talk today. She's one of my good friends. Labs are 3 hours long normally, so that is a long time. It does go by quick though. But the thing here again with the lab partner is if you have a good lab partner and you guys finish the lab early, you can leave. There's no one that lets you stay the full 3 hours. So I had some labs where I was done in 50 minutes, right? And I can go home after that. So that means I saved almost 2 hours from that lab, okay? Labs require preparation. So normally you buy a laboratory book, which is a small book, and it says the first lab, make sure you do all this before, go to this website or something, learn a little bit about this. Make sure you do the preparation. I'll be honest, a lot of the labs you're gonna go to, you're not gonna know what you're doing until after, okay? A lot of the labs you go to, you're just gonna be following the steps and you're gonna say to yourself, well, what's the point of this? Okay? Um, if you do good preparation before, you'll understand the point of it. But I do understand that as busy students, you might not have the time to really spend a lot of time preparing for labs. That was something I did. I did not have a lot of time preparing for labs, so I just went and did it, got the results, and then after the lab said, okay, well, why did I do this, right? And then I really spent the time to learn it, okay? So lab sessions will require you to write laboratory reports, okay? Laboratory reports depends on the lab. Normally, they'll just have a bunch of questions you have to answer, okay? It will require proper citations. So what is a citation? So if I get information from a website or a other source, I have to cite it. I have to say this is from that source. Um, Most schools use APA format, okay, which is a format for citations. So you have to know how to properly do citations. I can always help with this. You can always send me an email. Um, because if you do not do proper citations, you will get penalized for it, okay? I know people that just because they forgot to write, they write a big lab report, a few pages, just because they forgot to write one sentence, they forgot to cite it, saying this one sentence is from this website, they will lose maybe all the marks. Maybe they'll get a 0 on the lab report just because of that one mistake. Okay, it really depends on your professor. They are really picky about this because it is a big thing in science, right? Citing your work and claiming, giving credit to the source. Okay, I know people that even got in academic trouble because they forgot to cite something. So, for example, if you forget to cite a paragraph, so you're writing and one whole paragraph you forget to cite, depending on the professor, they might give you a 0 and say you have to meet with the dean, which is the organizer of the department to talk about this. Okay, so this is something taken very seriously. I'm not trying to scare you. You will get the hang of it. You're not probably gonna make mistakes. They will help you out a lot. Just make sure you look into this before starting your lab session or starting your lab reports. Okay. Another thing as well is you should know how to search for academic references. So for a lot of your lab reports and a lot of your classes, they won't take Wikipedia or any site on Google, okay? They want actual journal articles, or laboratory, or like academic textbooks, okay? I think in the next session, I will talk about this more. If you want to attend the third one, I will show you guys my tips and tricks for searching up, how I do citations and my tips and tricks for searching up academic references. You will get the hang of it. A lot of time spent on your lab report will be finding academic references, okay? So if I'm writing 2 pages only, you're gonna say, well, 2 pages isn't a lot to write, but just to find the sources to refer for that 2 pages might take you like 5 hours, okay? So this is the hardest part in my opinion, how to search for good academic sources, and I will talk about this in the next session if you want to show up for that, okay? Last thing about lab session, like I say, they might be their own separate classes, okay? Just like the University of Waterloo. But for example, UNA's chemistry, the laboratory course was a part of the main course, okay? Okay, so a typical mark breakdown, we talked about this a little bit. So how are the marks distributed for a class? Well, some classes will do a midterm exam format, meaning you only have a midterm and you have an exam and nothing else, okay? This is more common past first year, okay? Because first year they really want to try to help you, so they'll give you those small quizzes that'll boost your mark and stuff like that. But as you move out throughout university, like your last year at university, all your courses will probably go by this format, where it is just, for example, a 40% midterm and a 60% exam, okay? Now in first year, what you're gonna see is sometimes they'll shift weights to favor you, okay? So what do I mean by this? Well, let's use Yuna's example. So her term test 1 was 10%, her term test 2 was with 22%. Some teachers will say, you know what? Whatever test you do better on, we'll switch the percentage around. So what if she got 100 on term test 1, but 50 on term test 2? What they will do is they'll make term test 1 with 22%. So she got 100 on 22% and 50 on 10%. So they'll switch it to favor you, okay? This is common in first year only. Profs past that don't really do that. They really try to help you out in some ways, and that's just one of the ways they try to help you out in terms of marks, okay? Your first year classes will most likely have a lot of quizzes, okay? Those are free marks to do, right? Like I say, bonus marks, if they give you the chance, always try to do bonus marks. Okay, and this is something that really depends on your school. Waterloo, every course was like this. So pass fail exams. So what does this mean? Some courses say you have to pass the exam to pass the course, okay? Now, what if the exam, so if the exam was worth 30%, okay? And I'm going in, so I got 100 on everything else, then I have 70 out of 100. My mark is a 70% right now, right? But it doesn't matter if I fail the exam. So the exam might be only worth 30%, but if I fail the exam, I will fail the course. They'll give you a 49 or something on the course, so it's counted as a fail, okay? This is very common. It is very scary knowing that like whether you pass or fail a course is dependent on one exam, but normally courses that do this, they make their exams very easy, or very fair, okay? So where they actually test you fairly on the stuff you learn. So that's just something to consider as well. So if you're doing an exam, if it's your exam season and you say, um, well, I have a pass or fail exam, you want to spend some more time on that course, okay? Because you have to pass the exam, okay? So another mark breakdown, I think Una provided this one. So we see that in a course out of 100, the exam worth 40%. Okay. So she had 3 midterms. So test 1, test 2, test 3. Okay. Oh, this was mine actually. Sorry. So we had 3 midterms. Okay. And what you notice here is that in each midterm, we had a group test portion. So this was kind of weird. So after we wrote the midterm, they put us in groups and they said, do the midterm again with each other. Okay. So what that did was that so you could talk amongst each other and you learn what you did wrong, right? Or you argue for why you think some answers are right, and they gave that a mark, a small mark, okay? We also had something called clinical cases. They're just kind of like assignments, okay? So you see here in a first year class, a lot of other assignments, peer evaluations, 3 tests, right? But as you move on throughout university, it's more just gonna look like 1 test, 1 exam, okay? So you learn the mark breakdown. You learn how your classes work and your labs work. Now the term goes on and it's time for your first midterm. Your first midterms might be as early as, so the term midterm you assume would be the middle of the term. Most of the time it is not. Sometimes you'll have a midterm 3 weeks after the first class, okay, which is not the middle of the term. Sometimes you'll have a midterm 2 weeks before exam season at the end. Just the term midterm doesn't really mean the middle of the term. It just means like a test to assess your knowledge halfway through the class, okay? So normally you'll have 1 or 2 midterms a term, but the example I showed you in the last one, we had 3 midterms, okay? Format will vary. So sometimes most of your midterms will be multiple choice only, okay? Some of your midterms might be short answer and long answer as well, okay? Where will you find this information? You'll find it in the course syllabus that we talked about, okay? They will tell you the breakdown usually for each of your midterms. And your professor will actually go over normally. So the week before the midterm, you're in class, your professor will say, okay, you have a midterm next week. Here's the breakdown. There'll be 30 multiple choice questions. There'll be 2 short answer questions worth 5 marks each, blah, 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 okay? So you just want to listen to that, okay? Now, what I have up here is an example of a Scantron. So like I say, most of your midterms will be multiple choice, okay? So how do you do a multiple choice midterm? You don't circle on the paper, you actually do this Scantron, okay? So if you look at the sheet here, what are you looking at? So this is the Scantron sheet. So this is how you actually answer a multiple choice midterm. So what you do is you say, this is question 1, my answer is A. So you get a pencil and you color in A, okay? Question 2, my answer is C, so you color in C, you go all the way down, okay? Now it's important to fill this out right because what happens if I make a mistake? So say I skip 2. So if I skip 2 by accident and I put the answer for 2 in 3, well, that messes up all my answers. So I'm gonna get a 0, maybe, on this midterm, okay? So really spend the time to make sure you fill this out correctly, okay? So what I do is I will fill it in and then I'll open my midterm. I'll go to a random page and I'll look at the question and I'll make sure my answer matches with that, okay? So for example, I finish the midterm, I go back to question 10 and I say, okay, question 10, the answer is A. Let me make sure I put A on the Scantron, okay? Make sure you spend at least 5 minutes checking this because I know people that made a mistake here and they got 0 because they miss a line or something, or they put 2 on the same one by accident, and that messes up the whole order, okay? So you really want to make sure it's not hard to do, but you can make mistakes. Just make sure you fill this out correctly, okay? Okay, so another tip of advice I have for you is the 7-day studying rule. This is just what I go by. You might do something else. Basically, the idea here is that if I have a midterm, I will start studying for that midterm at least 7 days before, okay? So if I have a midterm next week, Monday, in 2 weeks, Monday or whatever, 7 days before that is when I'll start studying, okay? Another thing I want to say as well is your professors will give you practice tests or practice questions. I will always emphasize that first when studying, okay? So for example, I had a physics midterm and the professor said, here are the last 5 midterms, okay? We had for this class, okay? So what I did was I made sure the first thing I do was to practice every question from those 5 past midterms. You know why that is important? Because professors are lazy and they will copy the exact same questions, okay? So when I actually did that midterm, every single question was a question I did before. You know why? Because he took, for example, 2 questions from that the midterm 5 years ago, 3 questions from the midterm 4 years ago. He just copied his own questions and put it into a new test. Okay. So you're gonna see this a lot too. I know people that don't do the practice and then they get out of the exam and say that was hard. And I say, well, it was the same as the practice, right? So do the practice, okay? Because a lot of times it will be the exact same or very similar, okay? Even if it's just a few questions. So if the biology, if a biology teacher gives you a practice midterm, sometimes 5 of the questions will repeat, out of 50. So that's 5 free marks for you, right? Just for doing the practice, okay? So really spend the time to do the practice when studying for a midterm, okay? So now you've done your midterm season or you've done all your midterms and now it's the end of the term. So it is winter, right? If this is the first term, it is December and it is time for your first exam season, okay? So why is it called an exam season? Well, because it feels like it lasts a long time, that's true, but because it lasts a few weeks, okay? So your exam season will usually last 2 to 3 weeks. So during those 2 to 3 weeks, you have no classes, you just have exams. And the schedule will be given to you a while before that. So if your exam season is in December, you will get your schedule in October, for example, okay? And they'll tell you, well, these are the days you have your exams, and you will be able to see what your schedule is looking like, okay? So depending on the classes you take, sometimes you'll have back-to-back exams. So this happens to me a lot. This happens to every student. Sometimes you'll have an exam on Monday, an exam on Tuesday, an exam on Wednesday. And you're telling yourself, well, how do you do that, right? Because that's 3 tests back to back. And then you'll maybe get a 5 day break and then your last exam. There is no consistency with exam schedules. Okay. It just depends on how the university decides to organize it. You know, there will be some terms where it is unfair for you. Well, maybe you'll be taking 5 courses and you'll have 5 back-to-back exams. Okay. That's just how it works. Um, it is unfortunate, but you just have to realize you have to spend more time than studying for your courses. Okay. So what I mean by this is your term is done when you are done your last exam, okay? So if my last exam was on December 15th, okay, I write that exam, I am done for the term. There are no other classes, there's nothing else to do. Your last exam is your last day of that term, okay? A big thing about exam season 2 is to really plan your study schedule, okay? Um, I have the term sacrifice course down here. This is just something I use. Um, so like I said, there are going to be times where it's not fair for you. Okay. For example, you have 3 midterms, maybe 2 exams on the same day and an exam the day after. Okay. That's possible. You can have 2 exams on the same day. I've had that many times. I have the idea of a sacrifice course, which isn't really a good idea, but sometimes you have to tell yourself, well, what do I need to focus on the most? Okay. So if I have 3 exams back to back, maybe 2 of them have that pass or fail exam that I mentioned, right? So maybe 2 of them you have to focus on more, and that other one, well, if you pass that other course anyways, sometimes you'll go in with a passing grade even before writing the exam, depending on how the marks break down, then maybe I won't spend as much time on that course. And I'll call that something like a sacrifice course, right? So I won't spend as much time on it. I might not do as well on that exam, but I have to spend more time on the other courses, okay? That's just something you learn as you go throughout university. It is not fair. Um, it is a lot really depending on how you decide to plan your study schedule, okay? So before we go on, just a tool I used. So this is something called Cascade. It's completely free on the Google store. And this really helps you plan. So I use this all throughout university. I found it first year. So what it does, it's free. Um, you just go to the website, you make an account, so Cascade, and you just make lists, right? So I would say like exam week, okay? And then you make a list. So you say Monday, well, Monday I have a biology exam and then 30%, 30%, right? And then you make a list Tuesday and you could plan your studying, right? So biology exam, study physics, chapter 2 or something like that. So you make a big list and then you can just check mark. So I wrote that biology exam, I cross it off, so you keep track of your progress, okay? That is a big piece of advice for planning anything. You need to keep track of your progress, okay? So you need to tell yourself, well, I've studied this, I've done that. What do I have to do next? Okay, that's a big idea for planning, okay? So you're done your first exam season and you're now done your first term at a post-secondary. So you've done, so before moving, before starting school, you moved in, right? You found your accommodation. First week you did your orientation. You learned about your classes and you learned how to read a course syllabus. So you go through the half the term, you wrote your midterms, you did your labs and your laboratory reports, and then you did all your exams. And now you're done your first term at university or college. So first term of many, okay? So other things I want to talk about in your first year that I didn't really discuss. First year opportunities. So I know some schools, some high schools, for example, if you're a high school student now, you have a lot of clubs. Universities will have clubs for almost anything, okay? So they'll have something like a chess club if you want to join it, or what is down here is if you know Harry Potter, they play a sport called Quidditch. So there is actually professional teams at universities that play this sport. And it is like you run around with a ball and you have a broomstick, like you're like in the Harry Potter or something, okay? So there's legit clubs for almost anything. There are a wide variety of clubs. I put three main categories. So normally there are profession specific clubs. So if you are a science student and you want to go into pharmacy, there will be a pharmacy club that will help students like that, okay? So make sure you join that club, even if it's just give your email just to get the email newsletters, okay? So there are profession specific clubs. So pharmacy club, for example, if you want to go into pharmacy school after, hobby specific, so like chess club, okay? There's also the executive clubs, for example, if you want to play a role in the student council, um, there are clubs like that. Now, I do believe a lot of universities, a lot of these top executive positions, so if you are the student council president, that is actually a paid position. So you will get money because it requires a lot of work, okay? If that is something you're interested in, go ahead. It will require a lot of work. It will require you to do your research before, okay? Now, in my 4 years at university, I did not join a single club, okay? Why was this? Well, I didn't find anything that interests me, okay? At Waterloo, they have a wide variety of clubs, but there wasn't really things that I could really relate to. And I really didn't have the time to do clubs. It is completely optional for you. It is, again, a great opportunity to meet new people, especially meeting people with your same interests, okay? So if you go to chess club, everyone there probably likes chess, that'll help you really gain some new friends. The thing about the clubs as well is you're not just meeting people from your year, right? So in orientation, it's only first year students. If you go to a club, you might meet a fourth year student and become friends with them, right? And they can really provide you with some good advice or help when you need, right? Um, the last thing I'm going to say about clubs is, if you're unsure about whether you want to join a club, it doesn't hurt to try. Maybe just show up for the first one, and if it's bad, just don't show up again, okay? Like no one's forcing you to go to the club, okay? Um, it doesn't hurt to just experiment and have fun, okay? Another thing as well in your first year is you have to start considering internships and co-op. So if you are in a co-op program, you have to figure out when your first co-op term is. So for some schools, your first co-op term is your second term at the university. So you'll do 4 months fall, and then the next 4 months from January to May or January to April will be a co-op term. What does that mean? That means during your first 4 months, you have to start applying for co-op jobs, okay? Now, how does this work? Your school will really help you about on this when you start school. I'll just give you a brief overview. So your school will have their own website with a bunch of jobs, okay? So for example, Waterloo had something called Waterloo Works. It's a big website and it shows you there's thousands of job listings, okay? Meant for only Waterloo students, okay? So you go through that and you figure out which ones you are eligible for. So you're able to search it. It's kind of like a search engine, and you search it and you say, okay, there are 5,000 jobs. Out of that 5,000, 200 are for first year biology students. So then you go through those 200 jobs and you apply to them, okay? Now this is a long, tedious process. My program did not have co-op, so I didn't have to go through this, but applications and interviews is a very stressful time, okay? Why is this stressful? Well, you're not just gonna apply for two jobs, okay? If there are 500 jobs, they say apply for all 500, okay? And this takes time, right? Because for each job, you have to maybe fill out an application form. Maybe they make you write a paragraph about yourself. Um, it is a very tedious process, okay? But it will pay off. If you are applying for co-op, you want to apply for as many jobs as you are eligible for because that gives you the best chance of finding a job. Not only finding a job, maybe getting a job you want, right? Maybe you'll get options. Maybe three people want to hire you. And because you applied for so many companies, you can choose out of the three jobs which one you want, okay? So for every job, you'll have to do an interview if you make it to the interviewing stage. So what happens is the first stage, you apply for all the jobs. The second stage, the company says, okay, we want to interview these students, okay? So if I apply for 500 jobs, I might only get interviews for five, okay? So that is very discouraging because I spent a lot of time applying for all those 500, but then you have to tell yourself, well, I wouldn't have those five interviews if I didn't spend the time applying for all of them. Okay, school portal. What I mean by this is your school will have their own website where you apply for co-op jobs. Okay. Another thing about co-op too is you can find your own co-op. You do not have to find one of those jobs. You don't have to get one of those jobs on the website. Okay. I know a lot of students that were able to email maybe a company or something and find their own co-op job. This is a longer process because once you find your job, you have to contact your school and they have to certify it. They have to say, okay, if you this is the job you found, we want to make sure that it qualifies for a co-op position, okay? This is very common, especially in first year university. Why is this? Because it is hard for first year students to get a co-op job, okay? This is something they don't tell you, especially in science. I know a lot of people first year in science did not get a co-op job, okay? Now, what does it mean when you don't get a co-op job? Well, some schools will let you study for that term, okay? Which is not bad because you don't fall behind. Other schools will say, well, you have to take that term off then, and you have to do another co-op term at the end, okay? So that means your time at school is longer, which isn't a bad thing. Um, but my advice for you here is don't expect a first co-op for some programs, okay? I know it's a harsh reality, but a lot of university students in first year do not get a first co-op job, okay? Like I think my first year only 60% of students found their first co-op job, 40% um did not find a first co-op, so they had to either study that term or just take the time off and take another co-op term at the end, okay? So some programs do not have co-op options. For example, my program did not provide me with a co-op option, but they had other options as well. So this is something to look into. So other other options include internships, okay? So the University of Toronto St. George science program does not have a certified co-op, but they have a new program called an internship program, okay? I think I might have the link for it here. No, I have the link for it on the first one, so I can always provide you with that again after. Um, but you really have to start looking ahead for internships and research opportunities, okay? It really depends on the school you're going to, so send me an email if you want to regarding your own school, and I can help you find some internship and research opportunities, okay? So another thing as well is once you're done first year of university, not even once you're done, as you're going through first year, you should be planning for your second year, okay? What do I mean by this? Well, if you're here for the first session, University of Toronto St. George science program works very different than other schools. So their science program, all students in the first year are generic science students, and after first year, they specialize, okay? Now, you have to, while you're in your first year, you should be planning for your specialization, okay? So you should say, so I can open up the link here. I think I have it up here. So first year, you are a generic science student. Second year, you apply for one of all of these, sorry, any of these specializations, okay? Now, if there's one that you want, you have to prepare for it, right? So for example, if after first year I want to go into human biology, okay, I have to make sure that I took the courses before. Sometimes there'll be prerequisite courses, okay? So you have to make sure that you took those courses first year that'll let you get into the specialization for second year, okay? Yeah, so that's what I just wrote here. Make sure you have the prerequisites. Now, another thing too, so Yuna made this slide for me. some specializations will require marks, good marks, okay? This is more specific in science. The thing about science programs is your marks really matter. Um, Unlike other programs where everyone, as long as you pass, that's fine. For example, engineering, for example, as long as you pass your engineering course, um, companies don't really look at your marks. But for science, your courses, your marks really matter, okay? So you see here, averages required for admission to honor specialization modules in the Bachelor of Science program, okay? So these are a bunch of specializations, okay, for second year, and they are going to tell you, well, we only take 20 people for pathology, okay? Normally, you need a good mark, okay? They'll tell you the marks you need here, okay? So search it up, do your planning before you, while you're in first year to prepare for the second year, okay? Especially if you are in science, okay? And I can always help with this. You can just always send me an email and I'll be more than happy to help you plan for your second year. Your school as well will have career counselors and guidance counselors that you can take advantage of, book appointments with them, and they'll help you plan for your university career. So there are things called academic counselors, which will help you plan your whole university career. And I strongly recommend booking appointments with them. So I made appointments with my academic counselor. We sat down and for 30 minutes, we made a whole plan of my whole university career. So we said, third year, first term, these are the courses I'm going to take. Second year, third year, second term, these are the courses I'm going to take. And it really just helps you visualize your university path ahead of you. Okay. So really make an appointment with your academic counselor. They're all very nice people in my experience with them. It's their job to help you plan for this. It is free. It's provided by the school, okay? They will help you plan your specializations and tell you anything you need, okay? In the next session, I'm really going to talk about this because they will talk about postgraduate opportunities, okay? Which will be the emphasis of the next session, okay? So we're almost done today's presentation. Thank you everyone for sticking in. The last thing I want to talk about is my tips for you. So when I was making this presentation, I was asking myself, well, if I could go back in time and tell myself, give myself advice before starting university, what would I want to tell myself? Okay. And what I have here are 10 tips to enjoy your post-secondary education. Okay. These are things I learned. You do not have to take it for word if you don't want to. This is just my personal advice to you. Um, and a lot of it you won't understand until you really experience it firsthand or actually take the time and go throughout your post-secondary career, okay? So my first tip for you, which I talked about in the first session, is the big idea that post-secondary is not a race, okay? I know that if you apply for a 4-year program, you probably want to graduate in 4 years, okay? Well, what you're going to realize is maybe things come up or maybe you change your mind and your time at university might be a lot longer than you expect, okay? And I know that there is this idea that the longer you take at university, the worse it is. Like, it's frowned upon for students to spend longer times than needed at university. I do not want you to take that idea up. I want you to adopt the idea that post-secondary is not a race, okay? So you should not rush to finish it unless that's something you want to do. You want to get the most out of your time at university, okay? So you want to make sure that you really took the courses you wanted to take, you got the experience you wanted to get, okay? The big idea here is don't worry about taking longer than others. So there might be some people that take extra courses and graduate quicker than you. Don't look at that and say, wow, I'm really behind, okay? The university is not a race. College, university is not a race. This is an idea you'll learn as you go throughout it, okay? And a big thing to help you in graduating on time is planning accordingly, okay? Which we'll talk about a lot in the next session, planning your whole university career, okay? So that's my first tip of advice to you. My second tip of advice is try new things, okay? So especially if you're an international student coming to Canada, there are a lot of things here that you might not be used to, or a lot of things here that you might not be able to experience back home, okay? University is more than just going to school. It is a time of your life to really try new things and develop as a person, okay? So I really credit a lot of my like development as a person to my experiences at university, okay? And a big thing about that is for me trying new things, okay? So whether that be if you're not a social person, maybe your friends want to go out to a club run one night, maybe go out and try it. You never know, right? Or maybe in Canada especially, we have a very diverse food scene. Maybe there's a cuisine, maybe you're trying to buy dinner and there's a cuisine you haven't really tried before. Maybe it doesn't hurt to try that, right? You really gain the experience and it's really fun trying new things in my opinion, okay? So the second thing I have here is anything is fine in moderation. So what do I mean by that, okay? So say for example, you and your friends go out and go karaoke or go and drink every Friday, okay? Now other people will look at that and say, "Wow, you drink once a week, you drink alcohol once a week, that's a bad thing." I want you to adopt the idea that as long as anything is controlled in moderation, okay, it is okay, right? So there's nothing wrong with going out once a week with your friends, okay, as long as you have your other priorities in check and as long as you emphasize the things you need to emphasize. Don't get the idea that um, anything anything that anything is excessive in terms like that, okay? Another thing I want you to learn as well is to step outside your comfort zone, okay? So if you're especially an international student coming here for the first time, like I said, there's going to be a lot of things that you might not be used to, or a lot of new, like for example, food options that you might not have tried. It really benefits yourself as a person to really step outside your comfort zone and try new things, okay? Like I said, like if you're not a sociable person, it doesn't hurt to at least try maybe going out with your friends to a club one night or something once you're old enough to. Um, it might be something you end up enjoying or something, right? So all of this really boils down to the idea that education is important. Yes, you want to get good marks. Yes, you want to graduate, but also experience is important as well, okay? And this stretches way more than you might realize. So like even at my job now, like I really got some good references and all that just because I have same interests as many of the people and I'm able to talk to them, many of my coworkers, okay? So as you learn new things and try new things, like it gives you stuff to talk about with other people that'll help you as well, okay? My third tip for you is to be confident, okay? This is especially again, if you're an international student and maybe English is not your first language, you might not feel confident in communication or even participating in many of the things here. My idea here is you should be confident at your with yourself at all times, okay? So here be confident in your abilities. So this was something I did in first year university where I would write a midterm and I would come out of that midterm and say, I think I failed that midterm, okay? That's a big thing a lot of people do. They say, "Oh, I think I failed it," or, "I probably did so bad on it." And then you get your mark back and it's not as bad, okay? You should always be confident in your own abilities. You know, you should also be confident when talking. This is especially important. If English is not your first language, don't feel afraid to join conversations just because of that, okay? Um, it's really good practice too, as well, to try to communicate with other people who are more fluent in English, okay? Lastly, be confident in yourself. Don't just think because you don't personally believe that you won't get a job that you won't be given an offer. It really pays off to be confident in yourself, okay? And be confident in what you can do. I have this quote down here that really resonates with me. Um, Worrying means you suffer twice. So, for example, I write a midterm and I say I think I failed that midterm. That mentality is very bad because, just me worrying about the mark means I suffer twice. So it's either I suffer when I worry about it and I suffer when I actually get the mark and it's not as good. So it really doesn't benefit to have that mentality, that failing mentality, okay? Okay, my next tip for you is to take care of your physical health. So this is something I was very guilty at in my time in university. So if you haven't heard the idea of the freshman 15, it's the idea that in your first year at university, you are going to gain 15 pounds. Why is this? Well, because you're going to be eating out a lot more. The school sometimes provides you like with pizza, they give away free food and all of that. So the idea is that in your first year at university, you are going to gain 15 pounds. Um, Taking care of your physical health is something that is very important. So I was very guilty of this too. So throughout university, I drank a lot of energy drinks when I needed to, okay? A lot of the time I didn't get a lot of sleep, okay? I drank a lot of energy drinks. I took supplements like pills to help me like green tea essence and stuff like that that helps me and all that. Um I didn't really get a lot of chance to exercise as well. And a lot of my diet was just takeout food. So for example, I live next to Burger King and they had this $1 10 nuggets deal. A lot of my first year university, like when I didn't eat for dinner, for example, I spent a lot of time studying. I would just eat this, and that's not sufficient enough. Okay. Looking back on it now, it's very damaging to your body and to your health, physical and both mental, to not be taking care of your physical health. Okay. So make sure you do get enough sleep. Okay, make sure you do eat healthy, okay? And like I said, anything is good in moderation. So even if you choose to drink energy drinks or you choose to drink coffee, I drink a lot of coffee now, right? Even the caffeine and all that, it is okay as long as you moderate it, okay? As long as you do not take excessively, then that is okay, okay? Next thing here I want to talk about is not just your physical health, but also your mental health, okay? So my first year at university, in my residence building, so the building I lived at, 3 students took their lives because of the stresses caused by school. Okay. So I remember that they closed off my whole building for about a week because one student who lived on a high floor took his own life when he jumped out the window. Okay. Mental health is something that, everyone is going to struggle with during their time at university. Okay. The first step here is to know when something is wrong. Okay. So for me, my second year at university, I developed a lot of anxiety. Okay. So I would be walking in between classes and I would be having the feeling that I'm going to throw up for no reason. So, first, when you know something is wrong, that is the first step. Secondly, you should know where to get help. Okay. Now, your school will have their own counseling, on campus counseling that is completely free. The only idea here is that it might be long to get an appointment with that. What you might not know is that your school, so if I find my own therapist outside of the school, my school will pay for that therapist most of the time. Okay. There are programs set in place to help students like that. Make sure you take advantage of that when you need to. Okay. And the big idea here is don't be afraid to ask for help. Okay. There will be, I guarantee you, there will be times in your university career where you might feel very helpless and you might feel that there is no other um solution, or that you do not feel motivated to do a lot of things. Okay. And it's so easy to act in the moment in those cases, so I please stress to know where you can get help and know that it's okay to ask for help. Okay. Bell Let's Talk is a thing in Canada where the Bell, the company, one day they really try to advertise mental health issues. um, the big step here for me is asking for help. It's so hard for many people to take that first step and ask for help. You can ask, even your friends, even if you can email me if it's a few years down the line and you need some advice, save my email. You can email me. I'm pretty sure you can email anyone from the ELC, such as Ralph. We'll be more than happy to help. Okay. So if there's anything I really wanted you to take away from this presentation, it would probably be to take care of your mental health, because as university students, this is the biggest problem you're going to face. Okay. Um, Next, so 6, we're almost done here. Thank you for sticking with us. So next is the idea that comparison is a theft of joy. What do I mean by this? Okay, you are going to learn this throughout your university career. So you might spend 10 hours studying for a midterm, okay, and your friend didn't even study. Okay, you get your marks back. You got, for example, a 75%, and your friend gets 90%, and you say to yourself, "Wow, he did so much better in so much time," and that really takes away from your own accomplishments. Okay. So I was very guilty of this myself, where, I wasn't one of those people who didn't need to study as much. I had to study way more than other people because I struggled with a lot of the course content. Okay. And it hurts your self confidence and even your mental health when you really compare yourself to others instead of focusing on your own accomplishments and focusing on improving yourself. Okay. This is something you're going to learn as you go throughout university probably, but just hope to plant the idea in your head right now that you know comparing yourself to others really takes away from your own achievements and your own happiness. Okay. this kind of builds up on that in the idea that life isn't fair. This is a very common phrase. Um, like I said during exam time, there might be times where, compared to others, your situation is unfair. Okay. So, for example, unfair exam schedules where you have 3 exams back to back, and maybe your friend only has 2 exams and they're a week apart, right? There are going to be times where you're going to say, well, my situation isn't the same as others. I'm not being treated the same or given the same opportunities. And the sooner you realize this, the better it is to deal with it when the time arises. Okay. So, what I say in terms of this is always make the most with what you have. Okay. So, if you have 3 exams back to back, yeah, that's not fair compared to other students, but then you got to make the most with that. Okay. You got to say, well, okay, how do I plan myself accordingly to do the best on those exams? Okay. Next one, this is a big point I want to emphasize as well, especially given the recent coronavirus pandemic. Um, so as Asians, especially in Canada, not as common here as in other countries, you might face discrimination at some point in your university career. Okay. What do I mean by this? Well, discrimination is unjust treatment based on the grounds of race, age, or sex. So, for example, someone might be rude to you just because of your race. Okay. You might be not For example, you might be walking down the street speaking in a different language, and someone might walk up and say, oh, we only speak English here, or something like that. I've had that happen before with my friends. um, you will experience it in Canada. Canada is not a perfect country for sure. For example, there are a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes happening. For example, this article in Vancouver talks about an increase in anti-Asian hate, right? And also people who you think should be professional. So your professors or your teaching instructors, you're not always going to meet the nicest people, okay? For example, recently, a university here, so a professor at York University was mocking another student because their country was at war right now, okay? And you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not very professional. That's not what you expect from a professor. And you have to realize that not everyone you meet is going to be nice. Not everyone you meet is going to be caring. And not everyone you meet is going to treat you fairly. Okay. There will be a time in your university career where you will face discrimination. Okay. Um, and I just want to prepare you for that. Okay. And your school will have the appropriate resources. For example, um, you can report stuff like this. It is taken very seriously, right? You should be standing up for yourself as well. Okay. Almost done. So the last two, 9, I talked about this before. Plan ahead. This is going to be the topic of the next session. You want to start planning as soon as you can and with when you have free time about anything. Okay. So whether it's future courses in future terms, whether it's future jobs once you graduate, what do you want to do, right? Or also postgraduate programs. So as science students, you will probably have to do a postgraduate. Um, Postgraduate meaning a program after your university, okay? And you want to start planning for this as soon as possible. The next session, I'll actually show you a bunch of stuff to help plan for this, okay? And again, I bring up the idea that your university has career counselors, okay? You want to make the most out of them. You really want to book appointments with them. They are very helpful in terms of booking out your university career and your career after university, okay? They provide free workshops. I know the idea of a workshop is very boring, but they're actually pretty good workshops in my experience, okay? And maybe if you have a free weekend, maybe you'll go and attend one of those workshops, okay? So really start planning ahead. It pays off to really have a good plan way ahead of schedule, okay? Lastly, so before we end today, you know, when you think about university or college or post-secondary, you just think about school. Don't think about it just like that. It is a time of your life. I would say it is a once in a lifetime experience most of the time, unless you decide to go back to school later in your life. It will be tough at times, like I say, especially in terms of school and the stress, but you really want to look back on your university career and say, I really enjoyed it. I really learned a lot as a person because I think that's what university really is. It's not just school and getting marks, it's developing as a person for 4 years. And I look at university or college as, the last step to becoming an adult for most of us, okay? So, you know, you really want to spend the time to have fun while you're at university or college. Work hard, yes, you want to get good marks, yes, you want to do well at school, but also enjoy it. When you have free time, do things you want to do, have fun. You want to look back at your 4 years and be happy for the things you did. and not regret not doing anything, okay? So I know that was long. I appreciate everyone for sticking with us today. Please write down my email if you want to contact me. This concludes our second session today. So if you want to attend the next one, I'll go back up here. The next session should be on July 3rd. We're going to really talk about planning ahead and your further education. I know you're thinking, wow, it's so early for me to start thinking about my last year at university. But remember, like I say, it never hurts to plan early, okay? Anyone have any questions for today? You can feel free to write it in the chat. If we have no questions, then that's all I have for today. I know it was a long time. I appreciate everyone for sticking through. I hope you really gained something from this. And I hope if you want to, you attend the third session. So next one we'll talk about, postgraduate. That's in 2 weeks, okay? You have anything else you want to say, Yuna, before we end off today?
I mean, that's all for today. So you guys are free to leave. And yeah, thank you for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you.